You no longer have to clap. You might just want to smile for the picture because you know how it grabs it at the very beginning. That might be an option. I don't know when that starts, but either way, welcome back to another episode of The Banker, the Broker, and the Canadian. Today we will unpack and share ideas around masculinity, around mental health, around what Jim has coined the grumpy old man syndrome. Are men empty and suffering in silence alone? Or are they being impacted negatively by society's expectations of what they are quote unquote supposed to be? So Jim, you offered the thought, which I appreciate. You offered the topic, so I'll send it over to you and see what you might want to share about men's mental health and masculinity.
Here we go. Well, thank you. And thanks to all the listeners and the great responses that we're getting worldwide. This week, in unpacking the grumpy old men's syndrome, I think this is great both for not only the men in our audience, but also for the women. I think that the ladies also could benefit from just taking a step back and understanding, the men that are in their lives and how to maybe gently consider a little bit more about what they're going through and the heavy loads that they carry every day. And not that the gals carry heavy loads too. My wife has a super woman job in our community, and she carries the heavy load. And to frame this a little bit about the grumpy old men syndrome, if you wake up as a man in today's world and you're angry, you're upset, you are faulting other people, you are not waking up with a positive mental attitude and a let's go and let's try to not only get our self care and our self love in for today, but if you're waking up more on the negative and the grumpy side of things, then maybe this would be a great time for you to like unpack a little bit, look at yourself, and maybe be able to make some adjustments. So that's where we're going with this, and that's a long-winded answer of the topic, and maybe it needs to be more than one at this time.
Sure. So Jim, what have you seen, or what were you exposed to, or what did you read, other than maybe just your personal anecdote, right? Or maybe your other than your personal experience. What have you seen or have been seen reported that made this topic come to light for you?
One of the major things is that's a good question, Jason. I think one of the major things that I saw in researching this topic for today's episode was that I asked someone that was uh, in the 20 to 30-year-old camp, married, uh, grew up in New Zealand, and then lives in the United States now and owns his own businesses. And very bright young man, open to mentoring. But at the same time, when I talked to him about this topic, the first thing out of his mouth was, oh, and I listen to Spotify and bought podcasts in the morning, originating from New Zealand, because originally I was from New Zealand. I said, well, that's interesting. And he said, Jim, I just want to share with you that in New Zealand, men 25 to 30 have the highest suicide rates per capita in the world. And I need to fact check
Wow.
that, but this is what he's saying as someone that was born and raised in New Zealand, that still goes back to New Zealand maybe once a year with his family, feels like New Zealand, talks to me about the Manuka honey from this wild ass tree somewhere that, now we can buy in Costco, and all the benefits of that particular honey you can get from New Zealand. But more importantly, he really unpacked this whole idea of men and mental health issues within the country. In fact, I think that they have, he told me, every Friday dedicated to mental health awareness within men. And so
Sure.
that really launched this subject of, are we waking up grumpy as men? And what are we doing about it?
So
And so,
there are a few components, there are a few elements of this that stand out to me, Jim. And obviously, as you know, that I've done quite a bit, spent quite a bit of time on self-discovery and really analyzing human behavior to better understand how we all interact in this world and how we all come to have the beliefs that we have and have the thoughts that we have and behave the way that we do. And it's a few things. So one of them is we, and I say we as men, or we just as people in general, allow to a large extent for society to dictate to us how we are quote unquote supposed to be, right? And there's all these ideas that they purport, and I say they, right? Mainstream media, whether you consider it propaganda or whether you consider it someone else's agenda of the elitist or whoever you, whatever you consider that to be, there's a story being told. And that story oftentimes is impressionable, right? And it's intended to be impressionable. And an individual who may or may not be prepared to handle that type of pressure or that type of influence is going to succumb to the idea that they aren't what is expected of them, per se, right? They aren't what someone else, so the idea that someone else has some story in their mind of who this person should be. And so for me, and again, I want to kick it to Reedy and expand on this even further, but I think that there's an unhealthy relationship for the most part with how we see ourselves, and we inaccurately recognize how skilled we are or how valuable we are, and that we can actually contribute to a large extent well beyond what we're currently doing. But we sit with this fear, we sit with this insecurity, we sit with these, what I would probably call like a misalignment, and we don't actually express the way that we feel for fear of judgment, for fear of not being accepted, for fear of any number of fears. I know I kind of ran on for a little while, but the idea is that I think our opportunity as men is to spend more time embracing who we are as individuals and pour into that and dive deeper into that, as opposed to allowing others to dictate for us how we should be. And if we, in whatever method we use, are able to accurately and sincerely and authentically communicate ourselves out in the workplace, then my thoughts are that a lot of that mental illness or mental stress or frustration, mental insecurity, mental just overall challenges, however you want to call it, will often fade away if your actions are in line with demonstrating who your thoughts. So those are just some of my initial thoughts on it. And I'd love for any feedback or pushback or questions that y'all might have. But Reedy, I don't know what opinions or thoughts you might have.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with the narrative you have in your head, and I know as a father, as a almost mid-age male, life gets challenging with family, and that tends to set us off for whatever reason or not. But have you heard of male irritable syndrome, guys? It's
No.
actually, as I was researching this
I
topic,
don't
I,
know.
I came across it. I'm like, oh, what is this? So
Yeah.
I guess female, and I'm going through this currently. We all know they have menopause at 45, all 45 to 55, something around there. But male actually goes through something that's similar. It's I guess the male version of menopause, and it's due to once we hit around 45, we have our testosterone decrease. And there's some study, and it's in debate right now, that low testosterone has something to do with our mood, our grumpiness. And as our testosterone level decreases, there's a correlation with being a little bit more grumpy. Now, there is a little bit of debate on that, but for the most part, they're saying that, a little bit more grumpy, moodier, lower sex drive, um, and depression. That's something to be cognizant of for all of you listeners who are going into your mid 40s, like myself. But there are ways around that, as we all know. And one of the things that they say is exercise, good sleep, and also having a circle of people to communicate and really let out our emotions. And I know as men, and I'm guilty of this, we're not good with the emotional stuff, especially me. And we need to um, find our group of people, our tribe. It's actually from a book that I just finished reading. There, Find Your People. That tells you that it's very important that we have a circle of people to express our feeling, really let it all out, so that we don't take it home to our family, to our spouse, and be that grumpy man. It's very important that we talk to other people, not only uh, to our wives, but also to other men who could relate. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's great. I would imagine that science is involved in it at some level, right? That it is involved, some type of biological component to it has to exist. But and I think that not only is it a biological thing that at a certain age bracket that begins to happen, but I think too there are certain ways that I feel like we could probably override some of that in a way to mitigate some of that loss of testosterone, right? And you already made the point. Exercise is key, right? And so if we have not by the age of 45, it's imperative that we have built certain habits that by discipline and habits that keep us active, so that way we can mitigate that testosterone loss. Again, the increased activity or sustained activity is going to let us sleep better. It's going to keep that testosterone. It's going to maintain that sex drive. It's going to maintain fulfillment. Let's face it too, right? The community aspect of what you just described is so healthy. I know that men have a natural aversion to share their feelings because the perception is that it's not macho or masculine. But the truth is most men are just quietly dealing with whatever those issues are on their own because they don't feel like that anyone else would be able to relate to them. Well, newsflash, guys, everyone is an emotional being, regardless of your sex, right? So if you're male or female, you do have emotions. They're we're wired a little bit differently than females. And so we might express those things differently than females. And even among males, even among all males that are either in your to Reedy's point, find your people, you're going to express your emotions different than your friend. A key piece here, and it comes back to something that we've talked about a lot, the idea of acceptance and forgiveness. And again, I know that seems like a bit of a softer quality, right? It seems like, oh, that's kind of a gushy, that's kind of a, that's a female trait to forgive and to be somewhat understanding and accepting of others. But no, the exact opposite is true. Okay. I am my most confident when I am able to maintain how I feel about a situation, but then also be able to fully accept how you feel about a situation and allow you to express how you feel. And I don't have to judge you about it. I don't have to condemn you for it. I don't have to come down on you. I don't have to tell you you're right or wrong. I just need to hear you out. That's all I need to do. I just need to let you know that what you have to share is important. My relationship with you is important enough for me to hear you out and let you express what you have to say. And sometimes just that exercise in itself, I don't even need to offer a thought. I don't need to give you a response. And just the fact that I've created space to allow you to share is therapeutic for you. It's helpful for the relationship, and it's a huge deposit in well-being, right? It's a huge deposit in the whole situation.
It's a good point. I actually want to run with that topic there, Jason. So, the book Find Your People by Jenny Allen, for all you who want to know who it is and who the author is, she explore that topic of having that safe space, having those tribe, those people that you feel safe to express your emotion, whatever you're going through. But one of the things that she had trouble doing is actually it was easy for her to help her circle of people, but it was harder for her to let them help her. And she was never the one that's asking for help, and she felt I don't know, for lack of a better word, felt just pride or didn't feel like they could help her, but that actually pushed her people away from her. And there's a story in the book where one of her best friend that's always go to her for advice and seek help. She just stopped being friends with her because she felt that Jenny never needed anything from her. And so I think it's very important, as this book is, it's great that you're there to provide a safe space and help those friends of yours, but it's also equally as important to seek their help, because that means you value their friendship, their opinion, their comfort, right? So
Sure.
as men, it's hard for us to reach out, and I know that for myself. But it's easy for me to be there for my friend, and I'm trying
Sure.
to be a little bit more vulnerable, and it's hard for us men. And if we, you know, we hold it inside, our grumpiness will explode, right? So it's very important to find that your people and be willing to be vulnerable.
So as I hear you share that, Reedy, a few thoughts come to mind. One is that you're right. There's probably room for the author to grow in the sense of allowing for her friends to be there for her in a certain way. But also, too, if I look at it from the other side of the coin, it's kind of it's kind of unfair, just to use, I don't have a better term for it, it's unfair for the friend, for the friend to have this expectation that you need to be a certain thing, like you need to expect certain things of them. If that makes any sense, and I didn't have this well prepared, but the idea is that, really, if I interact with you in such a way where I say I have said expectations of you in order for us to be friends, then that's the formula for that's a formula other than just like normal virtues, right? Other than like be honest with me, be upfront with me, don't backstab me, right? Like some natural things. What that seems to me kind of silly from the friend standpoint to say that, really, in order for us to have a healthy relationship, I need you to need me. You see, like I don't agree with that. I don't agree that I need to set an expectation that you need to need me in order for us to have a healthy relationship. That's not that's unfair, and that's unhealthy, in fact. A more appropriate way to look at it, and again, there's room for growth on both sides, which is I have to recognize as an individual that peace of mind, contentment, and fulfillment is not something that I can assign to Reedy or delegate to you. Now, can you be there for me to hear me out in my times of struggle? Absolutely. And can I be there for you in times when you need me? Absolutely. But the truth of the matter is, at the core, any time that we expect our happiness to be fulfilled by another person, we're setting everyone up for failure. We're setting the other person up for failure. We're being set up for disappointment because they can't possibly fulfill for us the things that we need to work out on our own. And if I've convinced myself that I need, quote unquote, I need my friend to satisfy something for me, then again, that's not accurate. That's unhealthy. And so I would push back. I would push back on that. Now, that it doesn't mean that if they both agree in this friendship, okay, we agree to accept one another where they are, it doesn't mean that the author wouldn't be able to seek out the expertise of the friend if there was a certain area where the friend could be valuable or helpful to the author, right? If that were the case, then yeah, then she would lean on him for that purpose. But just because the author is not going to the friend with the expectation that the friend has of her, I don't like that. I would question that.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point, and I'm not sure if I communicated clearly on there's if I give you this, you need to give me this back. I think more so her message is, in order for that friendship to be truly sincere, is each side need to be vulnerable with each other. It's not a one-sided thing. Whereas I'm expressing vulnerability to you, whereas you're closed off. What I take from that, however, is uh, to be more aware that a true friendship, you're not always putting your wall up. With a true friendship, with someone who is in your circle, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. It is a safe place, and that's kind of the message I take. You don't have to always seek their help, like you said. Maybe you don't even need any help. Maybe you're all good, right? You got it all together. But just be aware that is in your circle of people. It is a safe place, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable.
That is good, and it might also show a lack of awareness on the friend's part, right? Because this too can happen. The author might be at a certain place in their development where there actually is nothing that the friend can provide to them in that way, right? That is a reality. The author might be so advanced and just calling it what it is. I've seen this in many other scenarios where the author might be at a point where the real value to the author has nothing to do with the friend being able to offer advice or whatever. Maybe the author, yeah, for whatever reason, does have maybe a certain guard up that they're not willing to be open or share with the friend. Maybe it's not from a seeking advice standpoint, but maybe it's just to share thoughts or ideas or things that are on their heart. Maybe, right? That more of where it's
Yeah,
going, Reedy?
yeah, you've hit it on the point. So she describes there's different archetypes of your friend and people. There's that friend that is the fun friend. So you go out to party or you do fun events with. There's the archetype of that friend that is your really your confidant, the ones that you are vulnerable with. There's that archetype of your friend that is holding you accountable, right? The ones that's like calling you out and not afraid to call you out, and you need those type of friends, right? So there's different archetypes of friends, and you're right. Maybe that friend that is the fun friend isn't really the one you go to be vulnerable. It's just for whatever reason, it's not them. It might be the one that you confide in. There's a different type of friend, and
I love,
yeah,
dude, Reedy. That's so good, and maybe there's a responsibility on both parties, right? There's a responsibility on both parties to be more clear on and be vulnerable with each other, and right, like I don't expect you to be X. You sit in this seat for me, right? You sit in this role for me, and that's how I see this developing, or that's how I see this staying. If that's a problem for you, then that's something for you to work through, right? But
mm,
as far as me, I'm comfortable with this relationship. I love the relationship that we have. I love the way that I share with you, and I love the way that you share with me, the things that we share. And let's leave our conversation and let's leave our relationship where it is, right? And maybe that's okay. The vulnerability and the transparency is key. I love that.
And I think it's good to pivot off what both of you are saying. As men, when we become vulnerable, at least with some, maybe one or two of our friendships, and kind of, I mean, Reedy, when we had a book club about this particular book that he was showcasing, when the three of us came to a summary of this vulnerability, like Reedy came to the plate and said, why don't we start with the men's mental health, and also you could do this with women's mental health and everybody's mental health. Is we start by doing a little bit of vulnerability rather than just throwing all our dirty laundry out to one person. And so this concept, especially, I appreciated Reedy's international and Canadian perspective as me as you know, someone living in the United States, is that maybe instead of just throwing it all out there, have a little test market, right? Start that way with someone and see what their response or the reaction is to it. But then also, I think the book and the author, as far as men's mental health, is that we need to start trying to find and maintaining relationships with one or two people uh, that we really, can unpack and are healthy for us in our mental health. And so part of that is becoming vulnerable and seeing if that other person comes back with some shares and is in a safe environment where we can express some of these emotions and frustrations and our anger and our situations that we're going through, and it's a give and take situation. So I think that when we become vulnerable with these one or two people, and you don't have to do this with everybody, but find your tribe of maybe one or two people that fit you. If it doesn't work, I think the author also comes across and says, keep going.
Mm-hmm.
If one doesn't work, it's the same thing that in if you go to a mental health counselor for mental health, and sometimes you need to do that. Your friends can only be so much. They're not qualified, they're not educated, they're not in that position to, you know, do deep dive counseling for you. You need to go to the doctor or the mental health counselor to do that. And
Well,
although
it
you're
depends. It depends on if you know that your friend has done enough of that deep work, right? And it depends on if you
yeah,
know that that individual possesses that skill set. And
right.
that's part of the reason, Jim, why I talk so much about spending time in silence personally and spent having a dedicated personal, routine and personal habit of a silent practice, because most of the time some of these issues can be solved by you becoming comfortable enough with actually looking at these issues on your own and becoming comfortable with them, right? We're in a perpetual state of distraction. We're in a perpetual state of on the go. We're in a perpetual state of ruminating and dwelling and being frustrated about the past and anticipation and anxiety about the future. And we're on our way to the next project and we're on our way to the next everything. And if we don't take personal time to sit alone and to be quiet, then we're not actually working through or dissolving some of those deep seated stresses for ourselves. And so that bit of cleansing of, if you want to call it the soul or whatever you want to call it, that bit of cleansing is not something that you can delegate to someone else. You have to do that on your own. That's self work. That's internal work yourself.
Hmm.
But what will also happen real quick, but what will also happen as a part of that process, as you become more comfortable with those stories, you will also become more comfortable with your audience around who is prepared to be able to hear or who you're able to offer those thoughts in front of. And so you're going to naturally just become more aware of who's equally yoked to where they can receive that or hear that and not be disturbed by it. You will just naturally know that this just isn't the right environment for me to open up about, to Jim's point, to open up and share about all of my dirty laundry, right?
Hmm.
There's a there's a phrase that I picked up from Tim Ferriss. He says, "Win the morning, win the day," and I really like that as it resonates on as a father and as a husband. Morning time is chaotic, and what really helps is I get up an hour, 2 hours before the whole house is up. And like you said, spend that time alone, have my coffee, read my book, meditate, do some stretching. And I feel like when I do that, I do it maybe 70, 80% of the time, my day is a lot better. I'm not in a whirlwind of waking up and then all of a sudden just chaotic. I actually have the calm before the storm and be able to prepare for that day. So I think it helps a lot with our grumpiness, our emotion when we have that time alone, especially in the morning, to really regroup to prepare for that day.
Any amount of personal investment in emotional stability or internal, improvement, any amount of investment will never come back void. It's not possible for that to be just right. Any amount of time that you spend cultivating that internal peace, cultivating that internal silence will better prepare you for all of the storms that you have in the future. To your point, Reedy, right? The storms of that day. And there's also a compounding effect, because the more time that you invest in that internal peace, the more prepared you are for all future storms that you're going to come across. Because I think one thing's for sure we can all agree upon is that the world is not going to absolve any one of us from dealing with storms, right? We're all going to have storms. It's going to be our own version of whatever that storm is. And we have to be prepared for our storms, right? So, to the extent that we're able to overcome our own internal battles, our own personal cross, our own, obstacle, whatever that is for you, then you are better prepared for the storms that are going to be at your doorstep.
Well said.
I think in playing off of what Jason and also Reedy were alluding to in this mental health and men's awareness is that what are some things that as the banker, the broker, and the Canadian we can share with the audience? And one thing comes to mind is that I'm almost 100% sure I can bet on this that the banker, the broker, and the Canadian this morning came to this episode with a great start in the morning. I mean, I wouldn't even begin to even start this podcast with these other two members. I had myself pretty much full for the day in the AM. It's not fair to either one of those two amazing men that I do the podcast with, as well as myself, and then to the listening audience. But I guarantee you that these two other people on the podcast did their homework. They did their self care this morning, or at least, like Reedy says, 70 to 80% of the time. And that's the reason why you can hear and you kind of want to be a Reedy. You kind of want to be a Jason Navarre because they're bringing that energy, but you didn't see like the before the podcast part of them preparing themselves and their self love in order to be able to do this today. So I think that Jason says this so clearly about having some time in the morning for your silence and for yourself, and that may be being getting up quite a bit earlier than the rest of the family in order to do that. But I think Jason also says something very important, and then Reedy also doubled down on it, is that when you do that, the benefits of that, not only for your day but also for your future, will 10x it. When we become vulnerable, yeah, try it out with one or two people and see how it works. But then also make sure that you emulate, Reedy and Jason in your lives, and that you set up the day for being able to be successful. Because if you don't do it and you don't take care of yourself in the morning, you don't spend some time in silence, then you set up your day for what? You know, like it's like I used to teach in school. I don't have to teach the kids how to lie. You know, I need to just set them up in order to be able to tell the truth. And the same thing with us. You know, it may be very challenging, but I think that it's so important when you wake up in the morning, grab your self love and your self care and take a few minutes to reset so that you can recharge, so you can begin this day with with path of success rather than the path of failure.
It's a great share, Jim. A couple of thoughts that I have as you were sharing that are it would be great if there were a way for us to have a more direct connection and understanding of the cause and effect landscape. Meaning that if we were able to directly see the effects of our the causes of our actions in a more immediate type of way, right? That's the to me that's the issue with. And I meditated this morning, or I did one workout today, and all I really feel is pain, or I feel behind, or I feel, and you begin creating all of these stories in your head on why the thing that you did to take a step in the right direction is in fact adverse to you moving in the direction you want to go, right? And so I think we all tell ourselves that story in a way. And so the soreness, the temporary soreness, gets in the way of us working out the next day. Or the fact that we didn't prepare adequately to wake up and meditate the way that we should have. So then we were a little bit late on the first day that we decided to do it. So then that's a reason or a story we tell ourselves to why we're not going to meditate the next day. When in fact, it's just we need to take on the responsibility of saying, no, it was really more of a me thing. This is going to be healthy, and recognize the delayed gratification component of any bit of those stacked efforts will result in in a great effect over time. And so I think that there's some bit of a disconnection between the cause and the effect, to where we don't see immediate results from the actions, and so it doesn't allow us to do it again. That's why I tell the story of how ineffective motivation is, but how effective discipline is, right? Everyone's challenge is to transfer that temporary bit of motivation into some type of sustainable discipline to where it doesn't matter how tired you are, it doesn't matter how much sleep you got, it doesn't matter how much you either drank or ate or didn't do, whatever. It doesn't matter what the other distractions are. You're going to behave in a certain manner based off of the habits and disciplines that you formed. And so it's a matter of transferring those good habits into your life.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm long-winded, guys. I'm sorry, and this episode's running a bit long. Any last thoughts before we wrap?
The only one I have, I think that would be the last share in closing, is a book that was given to me recently. I don't know if you can read this. It's called Gratitude One Line a Day. You can get it on Amazon. And basically, it's just taking your day, like this is April 9th, and then 2024, 2025, next year, 2026. So you're grateful for three things today. And I think that as you may experience grumpiness in your life, if you could just be grateful for three things when you wake up in the morning and then write them down. And then if you could share those three things that are grateful after you did that homework, uh, then that will help you launch. And let's look at the longevity of it. Not that you did it today and then, oh, wow, well, it didn't work, so I'm not going to do that anymore. So
Right.
be sure you stack those gratefulness days over and over and over again. You talk about it within your conversations today with the people that you love, your friends, and it launches into a very positive, grateful conversation rather than the weather, the sports, and how today's traffic sucked. Okay? So try that on and see how it fits.
Thank you, Jim. Reedy, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would encourage you find that archetype friend who is the one that you can share vulnerability with, or the one that you can have fun with. I think it's very important as men we do have those circle of people so that our grumpiness doesn't take over us, and then we, you know, unfortunately our family, our kids, our wives are the recipient of our grumpiness. Yeah, for all of you who are wondering how you can find those circle of people, this book does give you some advice and guidance on that. So that's my final thought on it.
Thank you, Reedy. And for me, my final thought is going to be around examination of self, right? So I spend a considerable amount of time on this, share thoughts, ideas, and around this idea. But I live from a place where almost none of us, and I'll put myself in this camp, see ourselves accurately. And so I fall short daily on the value I can be to my community, to my family, to society as a result of not recognizing and seeing my real skills and abilities and being able to offer them freely. And so, my encouragement to the audience and to anyone who's listening is to attempt to see yourself as though you're looking at one for the first time, meaning pay attention to your thoughts, pay attention to your speech, and then pay attention to your actions in the moment. Don't judge them. Don't say, oh, damn, I can't believe I did that. Or don't say, yay, I'm the best. I do this well every single time. Don't form an opinion about it. Simply observe it. And what you'll notice over time is you will naturally begin making adjustments in the direction of where you want to go. And the reason why you don't resist any poor habits that you're going to find, because I promise you you'll find them. I promise you when you start paying attention to yourself, you're going to find bad habits. Don't be angry with yourself. Don't judge yourself. Don't be shameful about it, because any bit of resistance to those negative habits are going to simply solidify it even further, and there's going to be even more resistance, right? So it's going to give energy to that act. So just observe it as neutrally and as objectively as you can. And then naturally over time, what's going to happen is you're going to begin making adjustments effortlessly, and you're going to move in the direction you want to go. So thank you all for your time today. Signing off from Reedy, Jason, and Jim. Until we meet again, y'all have fun. Peace.